I've done a few videos recently about friends, and I'm talking about friends between foreigners, not friends between Filipinos and foreigners. But inevitably, there comes a point where your partner, your companion, or their wife or girlfriend sometimes become acquaintances and often regular friends. In other words, they keep in touch with each other, often to have a little chin wag together, to pass on girly things to each other. But more recently, I've discovered that friendships can go bad very easily, especially between foreigners and other foreigners. We need to be very wary of people who are hell bent on trying to involve themselves in your life. What right do they have to talk to your partner, or for me in turn to talk to his partner, and try and undermine the friendship that either of them have? I say that's more than mischief. That's downright dangerous. Dangerous area in the sense that if there was any hope of a kind of ongoing acquaintance, that is certainly out of the ballpark at that point. I think that we already know that Filipinos love to gossip, but to be quite honest, there's a lot of guys out there that seem to also like to gossip. They like to suggest they've got the inside info on that person, and they're more than happy to pass it on if need be. To me, that's blackmail. That's trying to go behind that person's back to cause harm and discredit. And we have to be very careful that we don't have to associate with that person anymore. And sadly, the effect that it has is that what was maybe a fruitful relationship between the two women of that relationship or those relationships becomes soured also. It becomes regrettably unable to continue. Why, you might say? Well, because if the relationship or the friendship is to continue with your own existing partners, you can't do it not knowing any minute that things are being said about you behind your back. So, guys, you really need to keep a handle on these so called friendships. Ask yourself, why do they need to do that? If you've moved on, they've moved on, why do they need justification? Why do they somehow need to be always right? Maybe that's the problem. Maybe the problem has never been with your behavior. It's more about them somehow feeling disenfranchised. Maybe they haven't got the answers they're looking for because they never saw them in the first place. I mean, it reminds me of a time when I had a brother-in-law, sort of. He was living with a lady for some 9 years, and her brother, he had bipolar. And this is not about bipolar, by the way, but he had bipolar, and he was always talking behind other people's backs. He couldn't understand why people disliked him. He didn't understand that by doing so, it brings dislike upon him by the fact that people don't accredit that as good behavior. You know, we were working in a shop. I was subcontracting. He came along to help me. And I'm who I am. I will joke. I will be joyful. I will be friendly. And he wanted to be the same. So he sort of was hoping that my good fortune with the friendliness of those in the store while I was working there would somehow rub it off on him as well. A bit like the two Ronnies. Both were funny and people loved them both. But in his particular case, it fell somewhat flat, and he couldn't work out why. And clearly his own demeanour was that he was fairly upset that somehow he was missing the point. What was it that he was missing? He was asking. Why is it that way? Well, I put it down to some people have an ability to have the gift of the gab. Some don't. And of course, with him, he didn't have it. And therefore, the customers that walked past never got his jokes. In fact, they thought his jokes were a bit sick. But one tended to jolly the customer along, and they were happy with that. But there are all kinds that come to the Philippines. Everybody from all walks of life come here. You cannot expect to find the perfect friend. You can't expect to find the perfect acquaintance. But what you can insist on, and that is a certain amount of decorum between the two of you. I have no wish to talk with the person that I'm maybe referring to, but then he has a need to somehow try and understand what he's done wrong. Is it for me to tell him, or is it for him to work it out? It's a bit of a dilemma, isn't it? Because nobody wants to live with that feeling of discontentment around you, a feeling of somebody who is maybe feeling a little bit like a victim when they don't need to be. There's no doubt that he did help me get my head into the right place. He did assist me on occasion. But when I really needed somebody, he really wasn't there for me. And that's the way life sometimes turns out. Those that have stood by me from the start, right to the finish, are worthy friends. And those that fell by the wayside, it's not a condemnation of them, but it's just simply you win some and you lose some. My thought for the day. Bye now.